This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The former Israeli Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, has died. He died on Saturday after 8 years in a coma. He was 85 years old. Our guests are Professor Avi Shlaim at Oxford University, where he is a professor emeritus there of international relations, Noam Chomsky, the world-renowned linguist, political dissident, author, and Rashid Khalidi, Arab Studies professor at Columbia University, the Edward Said Professor of Arab Studies. You were just talking about the New York Times and how they covered what happened at Sabra and Shatila and the direct responsibility that Ariel Sharon linking to documents of Sharon's responsibility and U.S. responsibility. Elaborate further on that, and then how his life is being described today in the same pages.
Well, I describe it as the apotheosis of Ariel Sharon. He's being turned from a war criminal and a mass murderer, which he was, into a god in much of the American media. The New York Times has played an enormous role in this. Instead of, for example, running their own op-ed, which was published a little over a year ago, which lays out in damning detail from documents in the Israel State Archives Israeli and American responsibility, notably Sharon's responsibility for this massacre. They republished in their online edition yesterday an op-ed by Sharon in which he justifies the war. It has been a degrading spectacle to watch the American and the Israeli media turn this man into, as Avi said, a man of peace, something that he could never possibly have been described as.
Why does, Professor Avi Shlaim, why does Ariel Sharon hold the special place he does in the annals of Israeli history?
Noam Chomsky reminded us that one shouldn't speak ill of the recently dead. So I would like to say something positive about Ariel Sharon, which explains both his popularity with one segment of the Israeli population and the reviling of Sharon by another segment of the Israeli population. And the point is that towards the end of his active life, Sharon finally understood the limits of military power. He had always been a proponent of Greater Israel, but he understood that the facts of democracy worked against Israel, so he did not jettison the dream of Greater Israel, but he scaled it down to what he thought was realistic for Israel to maintain in the long run. So he had a strategy of redrawing the borders of Greater Israel unilaterally. Stage one was building the wall on the West Bank, and stage two was the unilateral withdrawal from Gaza in August 2005. Now, the withdrawal from Gaza was not part of any negotiations of an overall peace deal with the Palestinian Authority. It was a unilateral move undertaken in Israel's interests. So Sharon withdrew from Gaza, but he wanted to consolidate Israel's presence on the West Bank. And this got him into trouble with the right wing of his own party, the Likud party, and with the settler community. So he quit the Likud and he set up a new center party, Kadima. But Kadima did not survive Sharon's political demise. Today, Kadima has 2 seats in the 120-member Knesset. So Sharon's last-minute effort to realign Israeli politics ended in total failure. His enduring legacy in Israel's history is that he empowered and emboldened some of the most xenophobic, aggressive, racist, expansionist, and intransigent elements in Israel's dysfunctional political system.
Professor Khalidi.
Another thing that might be mentioned about Gaza is that there's a huge debate in Israel about whether the withdrawal was a good thing or a bad thing. The withdrawal did not change the situation of Gaza as being completely under Israeli control, which it is to this day. So Israel withdrew its settlers and withdrew its troops from within the Gaza Strip, but it completely controls the Strip from without. It is the largest open-air prison in the world. Sharon also had a notorious period as commander of the Southern Command in which he participated in the savage repression of resistance inside Gaza, killing many hundreds of Palestinian militants, destroying thousands of homes as part of a huge repression of the resistance.
Noam Chomsky, Dov Weissglass, a top aide to Ariel Sharon, described the withdrawal from Gaza by saying, quote, "The significance of our disengagement plan is the freezing of the peace process. It supplies the formaldehyde necessary so there is no political process with Palestinians." Explain what he meant and how that translates today to the so-called peace process that's going on.
Well, Dov Weissglass understood the situation very well. The Oslo Accords in 1993 determined that the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are a single territorial entity which cannot be divided. Immediately, the United States and Israel set about separating the two, making sure that they would not be united. And this is extremely significant, not only for the people of Gaza, but for the prospects of any viable Palestinian entity. The West Bank is essentially imprisoned. Its one access to the outside world would be through Gaza, access through the sea, through the air, if there was an airport, and so on. By breaking Gaza separating Gaza from the West Bank, that undercuts whatever limited possibility there might be for a meaningful Palestinian self-determination. Dov Weissglass pointed out that what he meant is, in fact, as he said, Israel will keep the people in Gaza on a diet. We won't let them starve to death. That won't look good in the international world. We'll just give them just enough to stay barely alive in this open-air prison, as Rashid Khalidi correctly described it, and they'll be separated from the West Bank. Meanwhile, both the wall, the separation wall, actually an annexation wall that Sharon initiated, and other development and settlement projects, including in the Jordan Valley, will effectively cantonize whatever is left to a Palestinian administration and surround it so that it is another kind of prison, surrounded completely by Israel and its Jordanian ally. Actually, Professor Schlemm said something very important in his first comment at the very end. All of this can happen because of what he called Israel, ironically, Israel's little friend, because the United States authorizes it, supports it, provides the requisite diplomatic, economic, military support, and also ideological support, namely by the process of reshaping and falsifying what is underway. This is quite reminiscent. This is not novel, unfortunately. If you look at the history of South Africa, it was pretty similar. By 1960, the South Africans knew that they were becoming a pariah state. The South African foreign minister called in the American ambassador and told him, look, we know everyone's going to vote against us in the United Nations. We're going to have all kinds of problems. But as long as you support us, it doesn't make any difference. And that's the principle that they adhered to right to the end of the Reagan years. 1988, the U.S., along with Britain, was still vetoing and blocking resolutions which would call for any kind of sanctions and support long as the United States, the most powerful state in the world, continues to play its crucially supportive role, unfortunately, these developments will continue. And this is of prime significance for people like us, for American citizens. It's our responsibility. Sharon may have had indirect, as the Khan Commission in its whitewash claimed, indirect responsibility. For Sabra Shatila, actually direct responsibility. And we have direct responsibility for the fact that our own government is crucially facilitating all of this.
What could Kerry do right now?
What should we do?
And what do you feel John Kerry should do?
What John Kerry should do is insist on implementing a very broad international consensus, virtually universal, calling for a two-state settlement on the internationally recognized border, which is, as was said before, the 1949 ceasefire line, possibly with minor and mutual adjustments, which was a U.S. policy.
We have 5 seconds.
Yeah. And this is supported by the entire world. It's been blocked by the United States for 35 years. We should shift that policy, join the world, and carry out measures which might conceivably bring a semi-decent peace.
We have to leave it there. I want to thank Professor Noam Chomsky in Massachusetts, Avi Shleim, Israeli historian at Oxford, and Rashid Khalidi, Palestinian professor, the Edward Said Professor of Arab Studies at Columbia University. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global grassroots news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org today. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.